So good morning to all of you. Nice to have you here this morning. Were any of you here last night? It was pretty amazing. Well, of course you were. It was pretty amazing. 600 people RSVP'd to show up, and we had lines down the block in both directions and going up 5th and Madison. And I've only been here a year and a half, but those who've been here longer have said that they'd never seen such an enthusiastic response to an opening evening. So it was actually really, for us, it was pretty amazing. And when we did our remarks in here, we were packed. And, for us, it's so many things. It's post-COVID, it's post-October 7. To have that kind of vitality in a response to something we're doing here really, for us, was very gratifying. Anyway, I'm James Snyder. I'm the director here. I know some of you. I don't know all of you. I've been here just for about a year and a half. I think Abigail last night spoke of how long? 1 year, 4 months, and 4 days? Exactly. She's counting. I'm not counting any longer. But I did arrive right after October 7, and there was really so much to think about then in terms of the role of museums generally, but particularly the role of this museum, and already thinking through what would be our agenda here for the future. But something that was top on our minds immediately was how to take an exhibition program that was already in place and make sure that it was attuned to the times, that it was not going to be tone deaf to the times. And interestingly, this has happened. It's this notion, perhaps a little bit of serendipity. It's also this notion of synchronicity, how always you can make all things fit together in ways that amplify in one direction or another. And of course, you've all seen the Trenton Doyle Hancock Philip Guston show that's downstairs. That had been in the works for 5 years, as this exhibition had as well. And the timeliness of that was pretty remarkable. The notion of Philip Guston, a Jewish artist 60 years ago struggling with racism, and then Trenton Doyle Hancock 60 years later, a 50-year-old black artist from South Texas struggling with racism, and the two of them in a visual dialogue. And the show, as you all know, is pretty powerful. And the reception in the media, again, was very gratifying for art taking the lead in looking at the complexity of blacks and Jews looking at racism across that stretch of time and through the visual arts. And of course, Book of Esther in the Age of Rembrandt couldn't be more like that in terms of being of the moment. And you all know, I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands, but you all know the story of Esther. So, it's set in Persia after the destruction of the first temple, when the first diaspora went to Persia, and this amazing story that's really a metaphor for courage and heroism. And this notion of Esther and her uncle Mordecai, who brings her in to disarm the plan of the madman Haman, who wanted to destroy the Jewish people. And after being groomed by her uncle to present herself to the king as one of his people, not as one of the Jewish immigrants to Persia, and to take her as his queen, which he did, and for her uncle to say, this is the moment when you have to go and tell the king that you are Jewish and that Haman wants to kill the Jewish people. And, she did that. And the narrative, it's like, think about it in these terms in relation to today. The narrative is these four voices. So it's Mordecai, it's Esther, it's Ahasuerus, it's Haman. It's like a quartet of voices that solve a problem, that dissolve a crisis. And I said last night, would that we could do the same here in our country at the moment, but that's another subject. But, for us, the exhibition, and this was Abigail's idea when she arrived here 5 years ago, almost immediately wanting to do this exhibition. So 5 years later, it's being realized at a moment that couldn't be more topical, when it is about looking at the Netherlands in the 17th century, just coming out from under Spanish rule, and embracing Esther as an icon for the courage, the heroism, the democratic spirit that would enable the Netherlands to launch itself on the global landscape. I mean, that's a pretty amazing story. And what it also is this sort of intersection of biblical history, politics, diplomacy, something that was critical in those times and that, again, could not be more of the moment today. So I arrived, of course, the show was long in the works, and I'm looking at this impressive list, a little bit still then wishful list of loan sources. So 120 works. You've all looked at the exhibition, so you know paintings, works on paper, decorative arts, manuscripts, Esther scrolls. And these works come from 35 museums and 10 private collections here in the US, Canada, across Europe, all the way to Poland, right, to the National Gallery in Warsaw. I arrived, this was such an amazing list, and it was such a collegial embrace internationally for something that we wanted to do here. Then, of course, October 7 happened, and I thought quietly to myself, is this going to disrupt the collegiality of all these museums and loan sources from all over the world? And amazingly, remarkably, everyone stayed in the picture. And you know, if you want to think about what museums are supposed to be about in these times and how museums are supposed to influence the cultural landscape, think of the symbolism of this, of the collegiality of museums and lenders from all over the world participating with us. And I think you may know that North Carolina Museum of Art was our collaborative partner in organizing the exhibition, and North Carolina and the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum will be second and third venues for the show. So it's not a story that we're just going to tell from here. It's a story that will be told in other museum settings, but still, and again, if you're museum folks, and you all are, you don't just look at the works of art, you look at the labels and you look at the loan sources. And it really is very, very gratifying to see the collegiality that we experienced in making this exhibition. So all of that's very exciting. If you look at the wall of all the sponsors for the show, it's pretty amazing that we got the breadth of support that we did, you know, from foundations and private sources, but also from the consulate of the Netherlands here. And you all know this, consulates don't have any money. They're really great. They want to be helpful in so many ways. They don't have money, but actually the Consul General here, who's an amazing guy, who spoke last night, Ahmed Dado, really was committed to helping with loans from the Netherlands, but also to getting financial support, which never happens, not just for us, but generally, and he did that. And so all of that couldn't have been more endorsing for what we wanted to accomplish here. Just two more things that I want to talk about. You all have been to Trenton Dahl Hancock downstairs. You will have absorbed this exhibition. It's going to be here. We're bringing later in the spring, Ben Shahn, Nonconformity, will be here. Another powerful statement relating to the moment. And you know that we're doing everything we're doing today just on floors 1 and 2. And with our new restaurant that opened 3 months ago, Locks, downstairs on the lower level, actually those little mini black and white cookies and those rugelach and babka are from Locks. So if you didn't sample them, sample them. The food is great. He's great. We could not have a better partner to bring food back into the setting here. But we're operating from floors 1 and 2 for temporary shows, and now Locks on the lower level. And you all know that the 3rd and 4th floors are in the process of renewal just now. We started in September. We're going to finish this past September. We'll finish this coming September. We're going to open in October. And if you haven't heard anything about this as yet, our 3rd floor will be an entirely new narrative, looking at 3,500 years of Jewish world culture, wandering in the global diaspora, resonating with cultures around it. And part of this is a commitment that I have that you don't want to look at you don't want to be culturally specific. You don't want to look at Jewish culture in a Jewish museum standing alone and apart and perhaps elevated above cultures around it. You want to look always at the resonance among cultures and the influences between your particular culture and the cultures around you, no matter where and when in the world. Our third floor is going to tell a whole new interpretive story based thematically, not categorically. So we won't be separating archaeology, Judaica, Jewish ceremonial art, fine art, contemporary art, other mediums. All will be integrated in a synthetic story that will tell that narrative over 3,500 years and really be about this notion of what are museums today and why are they custodians of collections and what are their collections about. So one important point needs to be that those collections need to tell stories. Our fourth floor, which has never been open to the public, will be open with art and objects from the collections in gallery settings where the public will experience teaching and learning in gallery settings where the public will see the 30, 40, 50,000 kids and adults who come here for educational training using the collections. When you come to see what those floors look like, it'll be a little bit surprising because you're in a mansion house museum and yet the proportions of the spaces that we're creating are very much not like what you expect to find in a mansion house. And the design and the aesthetic will be contemporary. And yet, again, you're inside a mansion house. And it should be galvanizing for bringing audiences here. But it also relates to what you're seeing at the moment on the second floor, because an exhibition like Esther Rembrandt really uses in an amplifying way and respects the historical detailing of these second floor galleries. So in a way, by treating the third and fourth floors differently, the second floor will be elevated as a venue where you'll see cultural narratives told in a setting that is also respectful of and resonant with the architectural history, the detailing of the mansion house where the museum sits. So that will be very exciting. But that's not for another 8 months. In the meantime, what I really want to do is bring Abigail over here to talk about this exhibition. Before she comes, I have to say, if you don't know her, she's really amazing. She's really amazing. And first of all, because she's both about European art history and Judaica and Jewish ceremonial art, she really is at a kind of powerful intersecting point for what we are meant to be about here in the museum. And again, speaking of the times that we are in, her focus could not be more relevant to the moment, and what she's done with this exhibition is amazing. You've all taken a look at it. You've seen how stunning it is, which for me is what matters when you enter a museum. You want to be blown away by the beauty of the place. We don't have beauty everywhere in the world anymore, and if you come into a museum, you want it to be beauty so that you can embrace it, and that's what we have here. And the last thing I'm going to say, just for those of you who don't read the Esther scroll all the time, there are these unbelievable words. So, you know the story, or you now know the story about how Esther rose to the moment after really being coached by her uncle Mordecai for so long to assimilate. And suddenly he said, you got to go in there, you've got to risk your life to say that you're Jewish and that you are coming in order to save the Jewish people. And she questions that, and she said, Uncle Mordecai, you want me to do that? And he said, but for a moment such as this. And so it's like when you need to rise to the occasion and when you need to demonstrate that courage. And Abigail has done that with this show, and really, you all have to applaud her. It's amazing that she's done it. And last night, the hundreds packed into this room couldn't stop clapping when we brought Abigail forward. So I want to do the same.
Thank you, James. Good morning. It's really wonderful to see all of you here this morning. After 5 years of much research, planning, and dreaming too, I'm so pleased that the Book of Esther in the Age of Rembrandt has now become a reality that we can share with you. This exhibition explores how the heroic Queen Esther from the Hebrew Bible, which is called the Old Testament in Christianity, served as a popular source of inspiration in the 17th century Netherlands for Rembrandt and other great artists of his time, like Arte Gelder and Jan Steen. Queen Esther was their icon, a star in the art and culture of Rembrandt's time. Following its New York showing, the Book of Esther in the Age of Rembrandt will travel to the North Carolina Museum of Art in Raleigh, and a condensed version of this exhibition will be seen at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum following the North Carolina viewing. The story of Esther, which I know we heard some kind of spark notes from James, takes place after the Jewish people were exiled from ancient Israel by the Babylonian conquest in 587 BCE. The story, which is quite fantastical and over the top, is set in the city of Susa, in the capital of Persia, which is the seat of King Ahasuerus, thought to actually be Xerxes I, who reigned in the 5th century BCE and was the ruler of a sprawling empire. The text actually describes from India to Nubia. He actually is overseeing 127 provinces. 127 provinces. This story recounts how the heroic queen risked her life to save the Jewish people of ancient Persia from near annihilation. Esther's story is commemorated annually on the holiday of Purim, and it's read from an Esther scroll aloud in synagogues throughout the world. So different artists in Rembrandt's time, along with patrons and their audiences, shaped the queen from this ancient biblical story from ancient Persia into a modern woman for the 17th century Netherlands. Queen Esther's story about resilience and courage in the face of persecution resonated widely in the 17th century Netherlands, when Amsterdam specifically became a safe haven for many. And Amsterdam was actually seen as the New Jerusalem, a symbol of God's favor and the Netherlands' hard-fought independence from Spain, the most powerful military force at the time. The Netherlands was once part of the Spanish Empire and fought for and eventually won independence in the very, very long 80 Years' War. Portuguese, Jewish, and Protestant Dutch artists, patrons, and audiences adopted Esther as their hero at the same time that Rembrandt introduced the world to his innovative visual style that made Esther highly accessible. His talent for capturing human emotion through naturalistic light and texture, from viewing images of Esther with inspiration from the world around him. The resulting depictions of Esther, from paintings, prints, ceremonial objects for Purim to everyday domestic objects and more, reflect that style. So I hope you can walk around the exhibition and you'll see great artists of Rembrandt's time inspired by Queen Esther's heroism. Royal queens and princesses requested to have their portraits painted posing as Queen Esther. Images of Esther found their way into every single day utilitarian objects that would have just adorned the home. Her story was acted on stage and illustrated in lavish Esther scrolls. For the first time since their creation 300 years ago, they are all displayed here together. We hope that this exhibition will illuminate how for the Dutch, Queen Esther was this courageous model of virtue. She was also a beautiful one and a symbol of bravery for the people of Amsterdam in their long fight against the Spanish monarchy. For the Portuguese Jewish community at the same time, Esther was not unlike their own ancestors and families, forced to hide their Jewish identity for fear of being persecuted. They adopted Esther as a symbol of hope and inspiration for their similar plight. Some of the 17th century objects in this exhibition are actually still used today in Amsterdam's Portuguese synagogue, such as the stunning red lectern cover, this luscious red velvet lectern cover, which is displayed in the final gallery of the exhibition. Thematic sections of the exhibition illustrate Esther's cultural relevance for the 17th century Netherlands, including how artists situated Queen Esther in the Dutch Republic as a contemporary woman, the ways in which they visualize the Dutch world, and its interest in exotic objects like turbans and textiles, specifically highlighting its trade with the Safavid Persian Empire at this very moment. This is notably seen through many images of Esther's feast. The final gallery takes us to the grand stage and the magnificent synagogue, which you can kind of call the stage for the Jewish communities, showing how Queen Esther and her story were brought to life in the popular Dutch theater and in private Jewish outlets. as well as how Purim celebrations commemorating Queen Esther unfolded at that time. I'll just give a couple of highlights. Some highlights of the over 120 works in the exhibition include 3 paintings of Esther's Feast by Jan Steen, which together create what feels like a modern-day cinematic experience of Esther's story. A dazzling self-portrait of Rembrandt as a young man of 23 from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum that's never been lent to another museum in the United States. 3 stunning portraits of royal women, such as Elizabeth Stewart posing as Queen Esther, and lavishly illustrated Esther scrolls by prominent engravers that have rarely been exhibited. These are just a few of the many wonderful works I hope you'll experience when visiting this exhibition. Together, these works of art in the exhibition illuminate the Book of Esther's meaning in Rembrandt's time and for generations to follow, highlighting the greatly admired Queen Esther as the ideal woman for their age. We are delighted to bring that to life for you through this exhibition. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I think you all know me. I'm Ann Schur. I just want to invite you to have some coffee and pastries. Go look at the exhibition. And if you need anything or want to talk to anybody, please come and see me. We also have our partners at Resnicow and Associates here. They're wearing name tags. They're sitting in the second row over there. And raise your hand. And we're here until 12 noon for those who want to linger. So we'll look forward to speaking with you as you're going through the exhibition. I hope you enjoyed the show. We are very proud of it and think it's the best thing since sliced bread. So we'll talk to you later. Okay, thank you again.